All right, so generally, is the sector performing well year to date? The figures in November look a lot better than they did in October, but is that the general trend for 2011?
Yes, in some way it does. You must remember that October we saw quite a significant decrease in the number of building plans approved. So it was coming off a low base, and therefore the slight uptick wasn't that significant. However, if you look at these figures from a year-to-date cumulative basis, it has been slow, actually strongly correlated with the 2010 numbers, actually following 2010 quite closely. I think year-to-date we saw about 2,447 plans being approved by the City of Windhoek, and yes, and this is actually a mere 1.3% higher than the actual comparable period in 2010. Where in fact, from a value perspective, 1.446 billion Namibian dollars worth of plans have been approved this year, or year to date, and this is actually 0.1% lower. So not much growth experienced in 2011 thus far.
What does this tell you about the general state of the Namibian economy? Because if you were just to do a comparative analysis with South Africa, as other sectors like mining recovered somewhat, there's still been so much inertia when you look at construction.
Yes, actually, you must remember that this is City of Windhoek building plans approved, and it's not generally representative of what's going on in the Namibian economy. Namibian economy being much more diverse, having fishing, mining, and then also agriculture and a number of other industries playing a big role. I think the Namibian economy is much more stronger than what these figures are representing at the moment. We at Simonis Storm expecting growth above 4% in 2010, and then also we expect it to accelerate to about 6% in 2012. So I don't think these figures are really representative of what's going on in the economy.
How do things like inflation have a bearing? Because inflation somewhere in the region of 5.3%, so that should impact on loans being granted to the sector. The exchange rate as well, the depreciation of the Namibian dollar by over 22%. It's going to add to the cost of importing some of these building materials.
Yes, that's indeed so. Maybe first of all, inflation. If you look at if you compare it to the value of building plans approved, there's a very strong correlation, which is actually very obvious, and therefore you can definitely, and we at Simonis Storm expect inflation to reach about 7% by year end, and then also to continue to trend higher next year on the back of food inflation, and then also cost boost pressure coming through because of the weaker currency. Now this is bad from the perspective that that costs are higher and we are paying more for our goods, but in some sense the weaker currency also leads to us being more competitive on an international perspective. And it sort of stimulates our mines, which earn US dollar-based revenues, and also from a manufacturing perspective, as we can, either our local manufacturers can compete with the imports, and we can actually export and be more competitive in the export market. I think from a building stat specific perspective, you can expect value of plans in 2012 to increase as a result of the increasing inflation. However, but this brings me to another topic as well. The interest rates, however, are at quite low levels, and we think that it have bottomed out already, and maybe even it will start to increase in 2012, early 2013, okay, late 2012, early 2013. And this will sort of hamper the number of building plans approved in the future.
Okay, Romé.
So maybe you can expect
Romé, what do these figures tell us in terms of who's driving construction? Is it government tenders? Who's demanding all of this stuff?
I think in 2011, government was quite a significant contributor to construction activity in Namibia. But however, when you survey the construction companies on the ground, you ask them questions, there's a number of projects coming up in 2012. A number of projects in Windhoek specific, like hotels and malls and flats, buildings that's picking up. But then also on a national scale, the government has approved quite a rigorous budget earlier this year. And I think we will only see that expansion or that government spending taking place next year, as it's a bit slow to gain momentum. and a number of a dam that is planned to be built in the south. So government and the private sector, I think, contributing equally to the current environment.
I mean, you spoke about the competitiveness of the local manufacturing industry on the basis of a weakened exchange rate, etc. But we know that 60% of tenders issued in the construction center are issued to Chinese companies, and that's become a very controversial issue in itself, is that a lot of construction is driven by FDI. The costings are driven by the fact that you're dealing with companies coming from abroad, some of them being subsidized by the state. It's pushing out local activity. Is that a big concern?
Yes, I think that would definitely be a bit of concern, especially from a jobs perspective, as Chinese are sort of having an import substitution effect, as the government are instead employing them as opposed to our local workers. However, I don't think the construction industry is the biggest creator of employment in Namibia. There's the agricultural industry, the tourism industry, and then also the manufacturing industry that contributes quite significantly to employment creation. And then we must also remember that this is only the initial outlay of the projects, and this is where the Chinese are involved. Maybe I think there's quite a good participation rate of Namibian workers whenever these projects continue, like the mines, for example. Once they are running, it's sort of the norm that 90% of the workforce will be Namibian related.